quorum, and I will call roll. Trustee King?
Shatanya King, present.
Trustee Macias?
Present.
Trustee Canoyer?
Suzanne Canoyer, present.
And my name is Rafael Diaz, present. We have a quorum. To our left, to my left is, and Trustee Pichel.
Renee Pichel, present.
Fantastic. And to my left is Dr. Fields, interim superintendent for the district. And we also have Ms. Rodriguez here. And she is present. So first on the agenda, we have citizens to be heard. We have no public comment, so we'll move on to item 3, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the rankings of the submittals for request for competitive seal proposal 22-24, middle school number 6.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes, sir. We're asking that the board approve the submittals for middle school number 6. You will see that when we went out for a competitive seal proposal for middle school number 6, that there were 3 submissions or responses, and you'll see the ranking there. You can tell that the lowest bid was not the one that we're recommending. And if you were to go to the back, I would also say that we did this in alternative bids as well, because there were some things that we wanted to look at. How much would it be to put turf on the field? Not saying that it was part of the original base bid, but how much would that be? How much would it be to do the outdoor learning area? And that's one that we are submitting tonight. How much would it be to put concrete in lieu of synthetic turf at the courtyard? And how much would it be to put brushed aluminum handrails instead of the painted rails? And we're recommending alternatives 2 and 4 with this presentation. But if you were to go to the actual submission, you can see that although one of the vendors received the lowest bid, there were other characteristics. We evaluated it based on price, experience, project management, past performance, and our subcontractors associated as well. And based on the best value for the district, we are recommending the second lowest bid. And I stand ready for any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Mr. Macias.
There's always questions.
I figured.
There we go.
Yes, sir.
Now we can legally put this question on the record. Just give me a sense of, I know that the recommendations coming forward, and I appreciate all the hard work, Helen, wherever Helen is. There you are, Helen. So thank you for that project and that work. So are we getting the project itself at a better value than what was put out to the community in terms of the projected cost for the middle school?
I would say that the value for what we're getting is approximately the same. If you're asking, has the price changed from what it was when we first? Yes, sir, it has.
What is that difference?
I can tell you it's about $14 million difference based on when I say that, it's based on when we had originally proposed the first bond that was unsuccessful the year before versus where we are at currently.
So when we had this on the ballot in November of this year for the middle school, what was the amount that we were asking for?
When you say November of this?
2022, this past November.
2022?
This past, yes, when we had it on the ballot, what was the amount we were allocating for?
We are well within that budget. I thought you meant when we did it the year before in the 2021.
And I'm trying to just ascertain what that difference is between what's being proposed, which
There
will end
is
up.
no difference between what was proposed in November of last year versus what we're getting right now, because we projected for this versus what it, now, if you were saying the year before when we had the proposed bond, then yes, there's a $14 million difference.
Do you have anything to add, Helen?
Yes, so
Sorry.
thank you, sorry. So in the bond for middle school 6, in the 22 bond, we had 106 million. 106 million included the architect fees, furniture, et cetera, so that was all in. The value for the construction cost was right at 86, and we're asking for approval for 80.
Okay. That makes sense.
Is that where you were
That's
asking? Okay.
perfectly what I just wanted to confirm.
Okay,
So that's all I have. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
The language that I move that we accept this recommendation for administration.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved by Mr. Macias and seconded by Mr. Diaz. I'll do a roll call vote since we don't have our machines. Ms. King?
Tanya King, aye.
Mr. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Macias? Ms. Eaton?
Deborah Eaton, aye.
Ms. Canoyer?
Suzanne Canoyer, aye.
Ms. Pichelle?
Renee Pichelle, aye.
And I'm Jennifer Rodriguez, and I vote aye. That item passes unanimously, and I think we're good to go.
I appreciate you so
right.
much. I'm going to excuse myself.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, guys. Yes.
All right. That's very exciting, very big. Yes. All right, so we will go on to item number 4, discussion item reports, seminar for interviews and final stages of search process. So I'll invite our search firm consultants to come join us here to walk us through the next part. I guess wherever this, yes, we're still in open session for the first part of this, and then we'll go into closed session for a portion of it. Yeah, sit wherever there's a spot and grab a microphone.
You guys, y'all rather sit together or?
No, I'm good.
You guys just sit together.
Okay.
This is fun. This one's for now, right? No, yes, both of those are for now, yes.
Do you have a microphone? Sorry about that. Okay. Mr. Barry, you and I will share a microphone, so we might have to lean.
Okay.
This is the on and off.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Test. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the night. We're excited. This evening, we're going to start with kind of an overview of the process in terms of the interviewing process itself. Some do's and don'ts. All of you have interviewed before. All of you have done this. But there are a few things in terms of school and governmental employees, frankly, that we want to share with you. And it's a good time to kind of get your minds all together in unison about the whole process. What you have in front of you is just a copy of the PowerPoint, just because I think that it's easier. Is it going to go on the screen, Betty? Do you know? For the audience, yes. And then you also will recall that on March 6th, you approved this. This will be very important through the next 2 phases, because this is what you agreed would be your guiding principles about your next superintendent. So I guess we're ready whenever you are.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get us started, and we'll wait for them to, I guess, pull up the PowerPoint.
Peter's with us on the screen.
Peter's with us, yes. So thank you so much again. This has been really, I feel like we're part of your family now. We've been here for a few weeks and have been in the district several times and have had the opportunity to meet with a lot of people. We are now at the selection phase of our process, and this is a really important time together. But we want to we do want to make good use of our time together and answer any questions that you all have about this process. But just as Nola said, this is really about thinking about the interview process itself. And so I guess you do have, let's see, I'm going to just take a peek at yours. So you all have the PowerPoint itself in hard copy, and as soon as it gets up, that'll be for the community to be able to see. But just as you think about preparing for the interview, as you know, this will be in a closed session setting with the applicants. And so just little things like the arrangement of the room, how we are processing what that needs to look like, making sure that there's good eye contact with the applicant, that they can see you, maybe think about name tags, who's going to be in charge of giving the applicant water or changing out little things like that. I think is just little things that you don't think about in the moment, but it's something that you probably want to assign to people to do in that setting. I think everybody will be in person. We haven't really talked about doing any interviews by Zoom, so it's all going to be in person. So there's no need to talk about audio needs in that regard. But it's also really important to make sure you review the applications of each of your applicants prior to getting to the interview. So we have 3 days scheduled for this. And so each day in preparation for it, just make sure you review very closely the applications of the folks that are selected for interviews. And just so you know, Nola, Rick, Peter, and myself, we all have been already doing reference checking on all of the applicants. Sometimes we do a much more extensive. It's not necessarily what an applicant puts in the application. We have pretty broad networks and connections, and sometimes we go a lot further than that. On the next page, thinking about questions and answers, you're going to find, and we'll talk about the questions in closed session. We have about 15 questions. Some of those came from you all. Some of those came from your consultants, and we'll review those to make sure that you all believe that they perfectly align to your leadership profile, which you approved. We generally recommend about an hour and 45 minutes for each of the interviews, and you have to think about maybe on the front end, some introductory, welcome and introductions, and then, of course, the opening question for the applicant. That in and of itself will take about 10 to 15 minutes, and then think about another 10 minutes on the back end for the applicant to ask questions. It should be a two-way communication, and so it's real important that you give that applicant an opportunity to ask questions. Keep in mind, it's really important also to be very candid in your answers with them. They're doing their homework, they're doing their research. They're probably watching right now and have been looking at past videos about how the board functions and works together. So when they ask questions, it's important that you all are just candid and honest with them about that. Again, we'll talk about, on the next slide, we'll talk about the questions in closed session. We probably need to talk about priority of questions too, just in case you run out of time. In asking those questions, we want to put our maybe lower priority questions at the end so that you make sure you get the meat of what you're really looking for. We think that all of the questions are pretty hearty and gets you some good information, but I think it's an important topic that we just need to settle on if there are any lower priority questions. If there are hypothetical questions, what if kinds of questions, what you're really looking at is the applicant's attitude, reasoning ability, their judgment, problem-solving types of answers. If we're talking about experience-type questions, go back to that profile, what is a good fit for Judson, applicability to Judson, and the alignment to our leadership profile. And then, of course, on the next slide, I would emphasize, as a former HR person, I can't say enough. Don't trail off and start asking questions that are not part of the script. All applicants should be asked the same questions, and we want to stay away from certain questions. I will tell you, in your opening question, the applicant's probably going to tell you things that are on this list that you can't ask. They'll tell you about their family. They'll tell you things that are more personal in nature to them, but that needs to be voluntary and that needs to be on their own. That's not a question that should be asked as part of the process. I won't read that list to you. You have it in front of you. But again, I think it's just good to have in front of you what questions that should not be asked of the applicant. I will pass it to who's next? Rick.
Okay. Can you hear me? Is it?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Okay. The next slide is on the interview workshop, obviously, and we're going to talk about listening and what is important. Listen to the what. What do they say? How do they answer the question? What's the content like of their answer? But also how they say it. How clearly do they communicate what they're trying to get across to you as board members? You want to think about their passion, enthusiasm that they have for the subject. And then how good are they at thinking on their feet? Is there anything that you ask that kind of gets them off balance, gives them a little bit of pause, not a pause to think, which is, normal, but, they don't seem to, they stumble around for an answer or something like that. Please feel free to stop. This isn't something that you probably don't already know. It's just reviewing for you things that you know. However, I doubt that any of you have ever interviewed for the CEO of an organization this large and complicated, unless you did a superintendent search. It is a very complicated business, as you know from being on the board. So on the next slide, we're talking about listening and sensing the applicant. Do they, in their answers, show an ability to solve problems, and can they outline a process for solving a problem? A lot of times when you would ask me as a superintendent, how are you going to do that? I'll say, we're going to figure it out, and I'll tell you how we're going to do it as soon as we figure out what the answer is. It's a problem-solving process that you need to be able to explain how that process works. What is their comfort level with the board as they answer questions and interact with you? And do they use clear, easy to understand language? Envision them speaking to your parent groups and community groups, and how will they come across with the language that they use? Look for eye contact. Do they do a good job of maintaining eye contact with each board member? Do you hear a lot of I statements rather than we statements? We statements indicate they're team builders, they're team players. That's really important. You should pick up on that. And is it clear to you that they've done their homework? They know about your district, and they've done their homework on the profile. They know what you're looking for. They should be able to address the things that are in that profile.
You have your strategic plan online. You have a lot of documents online. And so they should have reviewed those, and they should know, maybe not memorized it, but they should know, they should know about your district sufficiently.
Right. Okay, the next slide, you're talking about looking for the fit for Judson. Specifically now, you're thinking about right now, how would they fit in Judson, where you stand? And then as things move forward into the future, how do you think that will play out? Do you see their personality as being one that they would have the ability to maintain positive relationships, build and maintain positive relationships with you and with all of your stakeholders in the community. Okay, next, we're talking about feedback and note-taking. You want to see if they have in-depth answers. Do they go deep into the answer, or they just hit the surface on everything? They should have time to give some depth to their answers. It's okay to take notes, but it can be a distraction if you're just constantly writing notes. So think about carefully doing that. There's going to be space on the question form for you to take some notes. So you can do that. We're not saying don't do that, but each one of you will have a form, and when we get to the point where we're debriefing with you to move down into the number of candidates that you have after the interviews, you'll be able to share with each other, and some of you will have notes that somebody else may not have. And so you don't have to take every single thing they say down. That would probably be a distraction.
In fact, excuse me, Rick, but in fact, it may be more beneficial to really watch and listen, and then after the fact of that evening, make some reflections for yourself on a notepad of what you heard, because listening and writing and doing all that stuff's hard to do at the same time.
Okay, then on the next one, it's rating the applicants, and one of the things we recommend is resist drawing a conclusion after one interview. It's hard to do. I mean, once you interview somebody, you're evaluating them. It's real hard not to draw some conclusions. We recommend you keep an open mind. You can we want you to draw conclusions as you start moving down that path. But initially, you need to be able to discuss with an open mind with each other, each candidate, and see what reflections you get from each other. That's a real important part of this process. So we're going to be going from, we've talked about this with you, going to be going from the pool of 6 that we're going to recommend to 3 for our second interview, and then you'll be going from 3 to 1. But in addition to not drawing conclusions, we suggest you don't rank order them in your mind, because that then will cause, you kind of have a bias going into the discussion that you have with each other. And we don't think that's a good idea for you to do. Okay, I think no.
Okay, I think it's me. Exactly what Rick just said. Part of this process, we just talked about listening and the importance of listening to the applicant. It's also important to listen to each other, because what you will hear from each other may be different than you felt about a particular candidate. And so you'll want an opportunity to share your perspective about a candidate, and you want to listen to somebody else and go, I hadn't thought about it that way. When they said that, I really didn't think about that perspective of listening to someone. So it's really important. The other thing is that if you like or don't like someone is kind of irrelevant. What's important is, can they and will they serve this community to do what you said on your desired characteristics for the next 5 years, for example? Are they the person, even though you personally may not have felt like, gosh, I really click with this person, then you think, gosh, there might be someone else who can do a better job in moving Judson forward in the manner that we've all talked about. You will go from 6 to 3. The way we do that is we ask you, which 3 are you not interested in pursuing anymore? Because you don't know where you're going to land at the end, but there will be some that after this first round you go, I've heard what I need to hear from that candidate, and you're ready to move on. And that'll be part of the discussion on Saturday when you're meeting together. You want to really think about each candidate. Can they lead you to a higher level of excellence? Can all of the board come together around certain candidates? And who's the most capable of working with the community and the board? And this listening part of that session is critically important, but you will not be voting on the final group. After all the interviews are complete, we will not rush the process. The process, really have to trust it and allow time for full discussion from each board member and your perspectives and listening to each of you. And following that, you have what you will end up with being kind of your preferred applicants to think about for the second round. At that time, we will ask probably Betty to have some key documents available. If they're not online, where to direct them, the audit, the strategic plan, which is in line, the budget, the organizational chart, anything else that is online that you would think is critical. We need to make sure that that's available to the applicants so that they can study. This week is your first round. We have set aside already 2 interviews each day of the 3 days, and then your second round is the week of April the 10th. And that one is way more intense, more time with each applicant, and time for each of you to really delve into those applicants. We will have questions from this one that we'll talk about tonight in a script. And then from this first round of interviews, your next script can be follow-up to some of the ones. Certainly the topics will be consistent from round 1 to round 2. You may not get to all the questions, and you may defer those to round 2. But again, just keep looking back at that desired characteristics. That's why I gave you. You can look at their views, their practices, their style, competencies, accomplishments, philosophy, any of those that match with the profile. And you can also raise new issues for the second round with a candidate. You find out after going through round 1 that you really wanted to know about this, but it wasn't on the script, so let's put it in round 2, make sure that it gets that. And we will provide an outline for round 2. Round 2 is a little less rigid, a little more opportunity to go deep into some conversations. And so again, on the next slide, just a reminder, we put it in here twice because those things that you can't ask about. I love the one on arrests. Please don't ask me if I've ever been arrested. No, just kidding. The second round is with each of the 3. They all have about 20 hours in the district. They start on one day and it carries into the next day. And so we'll have a debrief with the board president, the vice president, and maybe the whole executive officers of the board. You decide that. You're trying to determine the candidate's continued interest because they're interviewing you as well as you interviewing them. They're watching this board meeting tonight and saying, is this a board we can work together? Can we be an effective team of 8? And so we don't always, but in this case, you've been a great board for us. Are you still interested? What would it take for a candidate to come? That's in round 2. All right, that's a lot of information. What can we answer for you about interviewing itself? You haven't heard from us in a few weeks. We've been working diligently since January 24th Now we pass it off to you and your time to do a lot of work.
I want to just make a comment, and we'll probably remind you of this. We don't have any favorite candidates in your slate. We really are careful not to have any favorites. So if it sounds like we do, tell us. We don't have any, and we don't intend for it to come across that way. What might at some point sound, we've had this come out before, sound like we do, is that if someone of you, if we're helping you debrief, make a statement about a candidate that is not correct, that we know for a fact it wasn't what they put in the application, or we know from other information that we have that that's incorrect. We don't want the board to be discussing incorrect information, so we'll correct it. And that's part of what we do in the debriefing, is help you stay on track with correct information as you share with each other. So that's about as far as we'll get, except helping you listen and giving you a process to come to your decisions that you need to make as a team. And that's, I think, our strength will be the process. And we'll, as we have all along, we've asked you to trust the process. Trust that process too. It will work.
One question I have, and I'm going to ask this question knowing the answer, but I think because this is an open meeting,
Right.
The open portion of the meeting, I think it might be important to say explicitly to the community, like, why are these meetings held in closed session? Why doesn't the slate of candidates come before the community and things like that? Like, why is it all done in closed session until a decision is made?
Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that we stress confidentiality, and we will still stress it through this process, even with family members and that sort of thing, is it's risky for the candidates. Mm-hmm. They do not want their name out there when they are happy. Remember, when they're happy where they are, when their community trusts where they are, and it's risky for them to be looking somewhere else. And out of this process of 6, there's only going to be 1. Mm-hmm. So 5 of them are at risk of damaging the relationship that they have where they are. The second reason is we want to bring the best candidates. The ones that would go ahead through a process and it's not risky for them might not be your top tier candidates, and we want to make sure we can bring the best of the best to you, and they want to know, is it confidential? So that they can stay where they are, where they're happy, where the community likes them, and be okay after the process. Rick, Jody?
That's exactly right. We always have that first question that they ask when we talk to them about, is it confidential? They don't want, a happy superintendent.
I'm sorry, he can't hear you.
Oh, I think.
Okay. Okay, so we run into this all the time, that some of the candidates are more nervous than others about that. They're all nervous about it. We've been there. We've been nervous about it. And that's the kind of superintendent you want, is somebody who's happy where they are, the board's happy with them, the staff is happy with them, and everything changes when they know you're out there seeking another job. And in many cases, they weren't seeking the job. We went after them. And so that's kind of part of the process. But Nola's exactly right. And you all seem to have gotten that very clearly when we talked the first time. In fact, we've never had a board that didn't. There have been some discussions, but more discussions than you've had, but because especially in the big cities, it becomes more political in terms of open or closed. But even the big cities that we've done, eventually the board came to the right conclusion, we think, on that. Mm-hmm. And it helped us get really good candidates.
Thank you.
May I just put a footnote on that? And that is that the Texas law is very well written to allow for this kind of a search. and the 21-day waiting period. And that's the reason for the 21-day waiting period, so that everybody who hears the name of the lone finalist that you ultimately choose, they can find out on their own if they want to, or they can maybe even have an opportunity to come and meet the individual. So the law is very well written. It's I think one of the best laws in the country for doing superintendent searches.
One other point on that is that that's one of the reasons, and you all were really good about that, is for having the focus groups and individual interviews, is lots of people have had an opportunity to give you input to help you determine that profile. And so we hope and we think they will, when they see and meet the new superintendent, they're going to see their input was part of that process of selection. They'll be able to see it.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? All right. If there's not any more questions, then I think we go into our next item, which is closed session, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're ready for that.
Do you want to take a break for dinner? Would you?
I think we can go into closed session. We can call closed session, and then usually we take a break right at that point to
Okay.
pick up our dinners and go to the,
All right.
do the things we
And
need
we
to do.
turn these.
Yeah, yes, let me just first, everybody else can close off their mic, but I'm going to read my little script here. So the board will now adjourn into closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074, discuss applicants for the superintendent position. The time is now 5:39, and we will go into closed session. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. The board will now reconvene in open session. The time is 8:25. No final action, decision, or vote was taken while the board was in closed session. There being no further business in this meeting is adjourned at 8:26. Thank you all very much. See y'all on Wednesday.
So I just want some more clarification.